Hi everyone, my name is Olivier Holstein. I'm a senior financial analyst at MTY Group. So last year we had the pleasure of working with SimpleFi and their team to implement SAC. So we're currently undergoing a huge ERP transformation. We're going in SP4HANA. Currently nothing is deployed yet, but SAC was actually the first SAP module we deployed last year. So again, I'm here today to share our experience, the challenges we faced, the benefits we've seen through the budgeting cycle, and how the process has changed overall. So let's get right into it. So the agenda for today, I'm going to talk quickly about who MTY is, for those of you who don't know us. I'll talk about our systems a bit pre-SAP, what it looks like. We had a lot of old systems, legacy systems that we're still using today until we get the full S4HANA. We'll talk about the selection process as well, so how we came to selecting SAP, what all our criteria were. We'll talk about the scope of our project, again, more specific on SAC. The process itself, so what we did exactly, how long it took, and exactly what kind of tool did we build. Because again, like I think John and Eric showed it, there's a lot of things you can build in SAC. So we'll kind of display, I'll give some screenshots, example of what our model looks like, just to give you an idea of what you can expect when using SAC. We'll talk about some results and the internal feedback that we got from within the organization, a lot of our budget owners, what they had to say about the tool. And finally, we'll discuss a lot of change managements, because when you implement a new financial tool for planning, it's always a huge change for your users. We've said it many times, everyone loves using Excel, but it's always about how do you get these users to leave Excel and really get them comfortable using the tool. And finally, I'll just present some key takeaways that we've gathered from our experience. So MTY Group, we have about over 90 brands in the States, in Canada, as well as internationally, even up to Dubai and Qatar. So overall, for over 40 years now, we were founded by Stanley Ma with an Asian brand in 1979. And we've kept acquiring and more brands and organizations just to keep growing through just the scaling. So today, obviously, with how many brands we have, it's no longer an option for us to use Excel for budgeting. So we really needed a scalable tool to make everything more streamlined and efficient. And some of our most well-known banners here in Quebec, that many of you may know, such as Bâton Rouge, Mike's, Scores, Thai Express, Valentine. So both in casual dining, we have a lot of QSR brand, quick service, as well as fast casual. And we're mostly focused on franchising, but we do have more corporate stores in the USA through recent acquisitions. And some of the most well-known brands in the States include Cold Stone, for example. We also have Taco Time, both in the US and Canada. So that's just a little bit about us, who we are. So let's talk about pre-SAP. So overall, we had 3 different types of ERPs with 70 plus isolated instances. So obviously, being a company that grows through acquisitions, whenever you acquire a new company, there's always different systems. They're using different accounting system, and it's always a huge challenge to really merge everything together. So this became a challenge for us, and as we kept acquiring, we made two massive acquisitions in 1 year, right before budget. So that was obviously a huge change, and this is why today we're now using SAC. We're also using a consolidation software with group mappings to individual mappings. This is where we'll do mappings such as our P&L accounts. We'll do, of course, all our capital spending accounts and the balance sheet as well. Overall, we have 5 different CRMs. Again, because we have different organizations through acquisition, we're still using separate CRMs. So we had 5 different CRMs, and 1 was the leading CRM. And then finally, the reason I'm here today to talk about SAC, all of financial planning was done in Excel through budget templates. It was a very manual process, so I can say we were very happy to change that. So let's talk more in details about what our planning looks like for Excel. So we had a lot of templates in Excel, about 100 templates and more. Each department and each brand had their own budget template where they could budget their revenues, their sales, as well as all their spendings. It was a very manual process, so all the historical data had to be populated by our FP&A team. Sometimes we had to validate data. We spent a lot of time just fixing formulas or just manually entering data, which obviously is not what we want to spend our time on. So it was extremely inefficient. Also for users, not everyone is finance savvy, because most of the users were operations folks that entered their budget. So there was a lot of mistakes when they were budgeting, and obviously having over 100 templates, it's very hard to really figure and find all those issues or all those errors that they when they're budgeting. And of course, when we wanted to consolidate, even though we were using Power BI to consolidate all the Excels, it was still a very manual process. So again, it was not ideal. So essentially, the FP&A team would consolidate everything, and we would send reports to the chief operating officer's level, as well as the executive team, and then finally, our board committee would review. So overall, really, we figured out as we kept acquiring with the scale that we were now at with more and more brands, it was no longer an option to use Excel. We were losing so much time just linking Excel sheets. So for example, we had our sales template and our royalties template that we had to link to our P&L because that's how our revenues were flowing. And we were losing so much time just trying to fix these, when you get those ref errors, it was really a pain in the ass, if I can be honest. So I'm happy we don't have to do it anymore, but that's why we initially moved to a financial planning tool such as SAC. So about the selection process, so we really compared two products side by side to look at which one was better for us. So the scope for the project was mostly financial planning. I would say that's 90% of our criteria. We wanted to also do reporting and consolidation features. So those were the three items in scope for the project. So the SAP competitor, it's called Board, they're in the States. So it's very focused on just planning. So overall, they came very strong in pre-templates. A lot of their templates were already pre-approved and designed. So there was very little you had to do to further shape it into what you wanted. They have also proven their ability to integrate with multiple source systems, which is always important. Everyone's using different kind of data systems. Sometimes they're very old and legacy systems, so you have to make sure everything can be imported correctly. And then finally, consolidation. It was meeting all requirements. We didn't have too many requirements for consolidation, but overall, it was fitting our criteria. For SAC, it came very strong in flexible templates. So this was a huge win for us. When you really want to shape the design and the templates and the formats into what you want and what you're used to using in Excel, SAC, as you've all seen already, you can very easily model it into what you want and be specific with it. Again, it has proven its ability to integrate with multiple source systems. You can import almost any kind of data into SAC, so that was a huge win for us. Consolidation, again, very similar to Board. It was meeting all requirements as far as consolidation features, making sure you could play with the data and pivot it differently, kind of like you do in Power BI. And finally, I'm happy to say the pricing was a lot more competitive than the products. So if any of you are wondering how the pricing compares for SAC compared to other products. So for the project scope, again, we had a planning module. This is where we had our P&L planning and our sales planning. This was the main module for all the budgeting cycle. We also had an HR module. This is where we would budget salaries, wages, expense, other various payroll accounts. And eventually what we'd do is, so both these models are interconnected. So the HR module pushes the salaries to the planning module. I'll get into that a little bit later. We also had consolidated reporting screens. So this is just a story where we had multiple reporting screens, and we kept adding on more reporting just based on how you want to look at the data differently. We also had data mapping and design because, of course, as I said, we're currently implementing S4HANA. So we have to keep that in mind just so we don't have to rework everything. And finally, a huge win for us is I think this year we're at 200 plus planning users. So ensuring that we have optimal security for numbers confidentiality was super important. So that was in scope. And this works a bit through, we've seen a bit like how dimensions work. So for us, how we designed security is through dimensions. We were telling which users had access to, for example, which business unit or which segment. So again, it was very, very flexible for us to do the security. So overall in our templates for the planning module, we had 6 different ones. So we had openings, closings. This is where the users could budget which restaurants were open for which period of times. So in this case, if you have a renovation going on, then this is where they could close the restaurant for the full month. Then we had the sales and royalties planning. Again, this is where we could budget sales. Of course, for us, we're mostly a franchisor, so the sales are not hitting directly our P&L, but it's how we calculate our royalties. So in there, I'll show an example later, but we could plan increase in percentage, increase in dollar as well. We also have a P&L planning for franchising. So again, all our franchising brands as well as other. So the rest is all departments. This is the template that we're using to budget their spendings and if they had revenues. We had a P&L for corporate because although we are mainly franchising, we do have some corporate stores, mostly a lot in the United States. So this is where we could budget things such as cost of goods, labor, utilities, and rent. And finally, we had a rebates planning, so volume rebates when we sell goods to or from our distributors. And finally, we had retail planning as well for a retail division. For the HR module, we had 4 different templates. So the first one, new hires, of course, just if we have any open positions or if we have new positions we're currently planning for. We had EE listings. So this is where we had the main roster of people with their salaries, bonus, other various payroll accounts, such as benefits or tax, for example. Monthly EE output is where we would take the total wages and divide it by 12 just to get it by month. Because of course, when you plan your, when you do your budgeting, you want to have your wages by month. And finally, we had a template for allocation. This is where some users or some people in the company, they work for the multiple brands or departments. So this is just where we could allocate their salaries based on a flat percentage that we would determine. So let's talk about the process. So it started last summer. This is where the building phase started. So we were working with Marie-Christine, who's here today. So he's a director. So we worked with them for about 4 months. This is the building phase where really we were testing a lot. We were building the solution. But prior to that, we still sat down for a good 2 months just to discuss the scope of project. And I think for us, it was really important to really sit down and make sure we understood the project, what exactly we wanted. So it's very important to label all the items that you want within your project. We also discussed data integration and templates formats. So for this, we shared a lot of our Excel templates with Eric and his team. And from there, they could really have a better idea of how to design the templates for us, the stories within SAC. And again, discussing data integration is always important because for us, there was a lot of data transformation. And I think for anyone who's going to use the system, there will always be a lot of data mapping and transformation involved to get it from, if you have a legacy system, to get it into SAC, which is a little bit more modern as far as data. We had to discuss dimensions as well as how to set them up. So this is really what defines the planning module. You want to make sure you have all sorts of different accounts. So based on how your data is formatted, what kind of fields you want to see. And this is also where we did the security setup. So again, it's very important to keep in mind when you're discussing the dimensions. So number 4, we did a lot of weekly testing, both internally and externally. And I cannot emphasize this enough. There is never too much testing. The more you test, the more you will find issues, things that work differently that you have to be careful of. So for us, for example, what we did is we had multiple users from different departments, different brands, organizations tested, just to make sure we were catching everything and there would be no surprise when we would go live. And also, SimpleFi was also doing, of course, a lot of testing. So Marie-Christine and Joe were always testing their solution, of course, before they sent it to us. But it was really, we were working with them to test the solution and make sure we were finding any issues or anything that arises. Again, we had daily and weekly meetings. So we had about 1 meeting weekly with Eric and just making sure we had the scope of the project in mind and we were progressing like schedule. And almost, I would say, daily meetings with, again, Marie-Christine and Joe, just figuring out, testing, shaping the solution, and just continuous building it. And finally, we detailed the process through a manual. So we had a PDF where we kind of explained everything, how we designed the tool, how it flows, how it works. I'm also going to show later, we have a cheat sheet for that where it's kind of explaining the flow of the process. And I think that's super important to keep in mind because if you don't document everything you're doing, then you might get lost into how exactly you design it. So we went live last year when our budget cycle started, which was about end of August. But after the go live, we continued making small adjustments based on findings. Because again, now we had 200 users actually going in the system. So there was more things that we were finding out, nothing major, but we found some small issues that we were able to correct fastly. And also this is where the reporting solutions, again, at the start of the budget, we were not too worried about the reporting because we weren't there yet. So again, we continue making adjustments to our stories for reporting. SimpleFi was available almost every day to help. So, when your go live starts, you're not on your own. They're always there to help you. It sounds like a sales pitch right now, but it's really what they do, and they were always helping us. So if you have any errors, there's always going to be small things that might arise. Sometimes new updates of SAP can kind of change things. We've had that issue, that challenge this year, because again, when you build a model, it's always based on the current update. and sometimes new updates can change a bit how things change within your model. So this is why SimpleFi is there to really always help. And shout out to Evgeny for helping us during that process. He was our support this year through this time. As I said before, we created additional reporting screens, and this was our second year today, not today, but this year. Again, so we made further adjustments. So last year we collected feedback from our users, what they wanted more to see of, and based on their feedback and the finance team feedback, we made small adjustments. We optimized the models. There's always optimization you can do every year. There's always things you can make smoother or faster. There's always data actions that sometimes are slow, and you can look into why it's slow and how you can make it faster. And another thing is dimensions updates. This is very important. This is something we expect to do every year. It's has every organization is changing, so is your structure. So you always have to make sure this is up to date. And for us, I think we're going to keep doing this every year. And I would always suggest to update your dimensions way before you go live with your budgeting cycle, because it can take quite a while just to figure out and make sure everything is updated, all your properties are correct. So let's talk about the results and the internal feedback. So overall, I can say that the feedback was very positive throughout the organization. Everyone was very pleased to finally leave Excel and get to a real planning tool. A lot of our users had already used planning tools in the past, and they were very happy with this one. Overall, it greatly accelerated the budgeting process. So I would say we probably began about almost a month faster through our budgeting cycle as opposed to using Excel before. We got to the board committee we got in front of the board committee way faster than previously. There was less errors when entering budgets because, again, in Excel there's always formulas mistakes. You can rely on the formulas in SAC. They're always going to work, right? So it's a lot more reliable. There was less errors overall. The interface is also easy to navigate. And again, a lot of the budget owners are not always tech savvy when it comes to finance tool. So it's very important to make sure your model is simple and that you make the navigation very easy for us. I'll show you some example of what we did. And finally, I already talked about the security, how it was optimal for us. So this here is actually one of our stories. It's the very first one we designed. This is a landing page. So what we do is we tell all our budget owners, when you first log in the tool, go to that page. So here, the top right, for example, for those of you who never got into SAC, you have the menu at the top right, the little burger, and then you can go to the stories that are shared with you. So you have to make sure that all the stories that you're building are shared with your users. Once they are, for example, we were telling them to put this one as a favorite. So there's a little story you can put it as a favorite, and this was really where they had to go, and they could access, as you can see, they can access any part of the budgeting process. And also we were labeling in which order. So for example, we would start with our openings, closings, then we would get down to planning our sales and our royalties. And then finally, we had a verification report just to make sure everything was good before we push those royalties to the P&L planning. And again, we had some additional screens such as for putting comments, because again, in Excel, it was always very easy to put comments. You can add notes, you can add comments. So in SAC, actually, it's a new feature now that you can add commentating. It's a lot more, I would say, useful than before. And this is where I talked about the other planning for corporate restaurants. So this is where we use a lot of percentage, like what's your cost of goods percentage, your labor ratio percentage, and all those good stuff. And finally, we had all our reporting. So once everyone's done budgeting, this is where we would review our financials with a year-over-year comparison. So this here is the cheat sheet I talked about. So it might sound like it's, there's a lot of stuff on it, but it's because obviously the process you cannot make it that simple. But this is here where it was kind of a reminder for the super users. In this case, it was myself and our senior VP of finance, just to make sure that you know exactly what's the flow of the process. Because before you go live, there's always a lot of steps. You have to load data, you have to transform it. There's a lot of steps. So here, for example, those here are all the steps we had to do before we even get to the planning. And there's also make sure you have some screens where you can validate data and make sure everything is accurate. Here again, these are just some manual steps. So as I said before, there's some dimensions that are important because there's properties that will really, they will shape how the flow works. So you have to make sure those properties are updated. So this one here is one of our templates. It's our openings, closing screens. So for example, this is an example of it's Alamokoko franchising. So all our franchise restaurant for that banner. We have here, for example, all the restaurants listed. This here is just to have a kind of quick notice if there are new restaurants, if they just briefly open or not. I mean, this screen was honestly very simple. So for us, if the restaurant was open, we would tell users put a 1. If it was closed, they would either erase it or put a 0. Both were working. So this is what the screen looks like. We had some, so we have 2 filterings here. We have filtering at the very top. This is where, for example, not every user could see all the brands, but here, for example, you could see I'm on Alomo Coco. So this is how each user could go select their brand. But again, by default, they would only see the brand that they had access to. And there's also other filters that I'm not going to go over too much. So this screen here, this is where we would plan sales. So again, very similar to the previous screen. We have all the restaurants right here, locations. And here, of course, I erase all the numbers. But for example, all our system sales actuals from 23. This is actually taken from this year. So we're always showing 2 year prior of data. So here we had the historical sales and budget owners had 2 ways they could budget. They could either budget with a percentage increase or a decrease, or they could also put their system sales directly here. And actually what was very nice that we designed is it's a reverse formula, which means if you're changing the sales number for your budget, it's going to change the percentage as well. So it's always interactive with each other. And of course, we're doing it by month. And I'm not going to show the royalties planning, but it's very similar. Again, for royalties, we had a list of restaurants. We had what's the royalty rate for each restaurant. So this screen is pretty much the same for our sales and royalties planning. So this here is actually one of our P&L screens. So as I said, we have 2, one for corporates, one for franchising and other. So here again, so we just have again the brand. We have the responsibility center, which is another dimension account that we have. Here are all the P&Ls accounts. Well, some of them. We have a lot more than that, of course. And again, very similar to the last screen, here we have our 23 actuals number. We have our 24. And we have the 25 budget. As opposed to the other screen, this one, the budget, it's pre-populated with zeros because for us, we didn't want to pre-pop, like we don't want to have any presets, any calculations such as increase or decrease. So for us, it was all blank, but this is something you can always change. And you can ask SimpleFi to add some percentage as well for increase or decrease of your expenses. So this screen here, this is one of our reporting screens. So again, at the very top, you can see we have just kind of like an Excel, we have all these tabs based on what you're looking at. And again, you can see it's a very similar screen. So on the left-hand side, you can see some names. These are all our COOs. We have the EBITDA, and you can always open it. It's a little bit different from Power BI, the way it flows, but you kind of get used to it. So here you can open your EBITDA. You'll see all the kind of different levels of P&L you want to see, such as gross margin, that you can open that even further. And again, you can see at the top the months, and it's very, very similar to the previous screen. So this is where I mentioned that it's very easy to, once you get your initial design, everything else is kind of going to flow the same, and the format's going to be the same. So you save a lot of time. This is just a brief screenshot of what our model looks like. So again, here we have the data foundation, just some basic accounts, and then around we have all the dimensions we're using. So you're always going to need dimensions for your date, for how you're looking at things on a fiscal year level. For example, we had some product. This was a dimension specific to our retail division. So there's some dimensions here that they won't relate to the whole model, but they're still required for everything to float together. And for us, since a lot of our information, so the sales was coming from CRM, and the finance data was coming from our finance tool. So this is where the dimensions have to really merge everything together. So there's always some mapping involved. Just want to re-emphasize, always keep your model simple and structured, because if you make it too complex, you'll easily get lost. And this is where I would always recommend to rely on SimpleFi or your consultants, because they're used to it, they're very experienced, so they know what you look like. But if I could say for us, when we first got into the tool, it was very confusing. How exactly did we design it? We don't have the full picture in mind. So we heavily had to rely on them. But again, as we progressed through the tool, we got better with the tool and just learned a lot more insight. So I want to talk about change management. So as I said before, convincing your users to leave Excel is always a big challenge. Especially when it comes to operations, they're very comfortable in the ways Excel overall. I think everyone knows how to use Excel, so it's always a big challenge. So for us, again, we had over 200 users, 5 different organizations, 90 plus brands, and 20 plus departments. Almost 95% of our users are operations related. About 5% is finance. So here's how we manage the change. So before our go live, which again was last year, we had a lot of training sessions. So it was myself. I was meeting with about each division about for 2 hours, really going through the full process, doing a live demo in front of them. And if they had any questions, they could stop me and just ask them. But overall, it was really start to finish. Here's how it looks like. Here's the feature. Here's how the tool works. We also had some training videos, of course, so not everyone could attend these training sessions. So I made multiple training videos just detailing everything, every screen, the overall flow, how it works. We also prepared some documentation, so written, so both PowerPoint and PDF. This is something I told all my users, make sure you have on standby during the budget cycle, because again, it's a new tool for them. And even through the training, they're going to forget a lot of things. But if you have like a PDF or a PowerPoint, and you tell users to have it on standby, they can always look back at some slides and see, okay, how do I do this thing again? And then they go back and check as a reminder. We also had some open training sessions. This is just where basically it was me sitting for 2 hours waiting for people to come in and ask questions. I can say though that there was not a lot of questions because for most people, until you really get your hands in the tools, you're not going to have a lot of questions. It's hard to really get like a good idea of what it looks like and what kind of situations or problems you might encounter. So a lot of the questions really came after we went live. But again, it was still useful. You know, what we told people is review the documentation, look at the videos. If you still have questions, if there are things that are unclear, go in these drop-in sessions and just ask any question, whether it's about the features of the tool or even about your budget specifically. And again, as I said before, you have to constantly provide support throughout the budget. There's always things that will come up that you need to take care of. I think everyone here kind of knows how to best practice for budgeting. And finally, just having constant communication with the ops teams. So again, just through emails or teams, make sure they know. For example, like us, we would lock the tool sometimes that no one could input their budget anymore because this is what the deadline. Or for example, we wanted to do a first round of review and then we'll do a second round. And so this is where we would constantly send these communications. And again, all the PDFs and the PowerPoint that I talk about, well, you have to send them via email. So just make sure you communicate those with your team. So now I want to take a step back and really speak about some key takeaways that we've gathered from our experience. So number one, of course, selecting the right partner. Couldn't be happier selecting SimpleFi. So, and of course, the product. So you have to make sure you know the full scope of your project, everything that it will entitle, and you have to make sure that the SAC or any other tool is really going to fit what you're looking for and your needs. Number two is keeping the project structure simple and clear. Spoke about this many times, but just going to rehash it out again. Always make sure the project is very clear to you and don't make it too complex, otherwise you will get lost. Number three is verifying data integration. Again, I think everyone knows this one, but just make sure you're transforming a lot of data from your source systems. So you want to always validate that the data you have in SAC matches what you have in your internal system. So this is always something you should do. Again, the more testing, the better. So for us, I don't even think as of today, there's probably still more testing that we should do, things that we look to implement. But again, this is more for the building phase. But even after the go live is, after your budget cycle is closed, you should keep testing because there's always new features. There's always things you want to change. So the more you test, the better. And also, don't just have one user testing. It's always good to have multiple users, different perspective. One business unit might have a different structure, different needs, so they might have different feedback than you do. Number five is constant communication with your business partners. So whether it's SimpleFi, your consultants, or with your ops teams, make sure you're always constantly updating them on the tool. So for example, you encounter a bug or there's a mistake there's an error that a lot of people are getting. You want to communicate that to your team through emails or Teams, up to you. But again, just constantly sending out those memos. And again, also this is where we would send reminders such as, hey, just a reminder, the tool is locking next week. Make sure you have your budget in place. Number six, we have encouraging users to use a new system and leave Excel. So I'll speak a little bit more about this one. I can say a lot of our users were very reticent to changing and using SAC. And as I said, a lot of the questions I got from our users is, can we import Excel? Can we load Excel into the tool? And while there is a way you can do it, for me, it's never the right approach because there's always a better way, unless it's loading initial data. But when it comes to budgeting, we designed the tool for them, right? And we designed it based on the Excel sheets that they were used to doing. So you're always going to need a little bit of pushback. You're always going to get a little pushback from your budget owners, but you really want to make sure you're pushing them and show them how they can use the tool to replicate the kind of things they're used to doing in Excel. Show them how you can better optimize your budget, how it's more optimal. And again, this is really a key takeaway from us. Like, we want to make sure that our users lead Excel. Also, you want to have super users available through the budget cycle. And I can say you can never have too many super users. So of course, you can always rely on the consultants, but just for efficiency, you want to be able to answer some questions yourself. Myself included, I've done some research. I've looked at some YouTube videos just to learn the tool. I've also explored a lot, just self-learning. And honestly, I can say it makes the process a lot more efficient. If there's questions or things that come up from your budget owners, you don't always, obviously SimpleFi is always going to be available, but you want to make sure you're able to answer some questions yourself, because it just goes by a lot faster. Of course, they always have projects going on. So, and there's never too many super users. So that's one thing I think ourselves as a company we can improve. Right now, we probably have about 2 super users. I would recommend a lot more than that if possible. So the way you get that done is you get more people involved in the project. You get more people working with SimpleFi to really design the templates and work on the tool, and they will become a lot better with the tool. Lastly is collecting feedback and continuing to make improvements. So there's always optimization you can do. Again, there's always features that SAC sends out in their new updates and their quarterly updates, which you can really use it for just optimizing your process further. So for us, what we did, for example, is we sat down with all the executive teams, and we collected feedback from all the users. There's always going to be a lot of noise sometimes in the feedback, so you want to make sure it's constructive. Sometimes people might say, "Oh, it was slow." Well, yeah, it was because 200 people were in the system at the same time as you. So, there's always you have to kind of clear the noise of feedback. But again, it's always important to make sure you collect it from your users, because at the end of the day, we're really designing these tools for them, right? And or if your finance team is the one budgeting, you're designing a tool for them, so you want to make sure you get their feedback. So that concludes my presentation. I hope it was insightful, just to share a bit of our experience overall. And if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer.